Hello my fellow Zoro cosplayers, and welcome to my tutorial on how to wear Zoro's katanas without using a holster in a way that keeps them nice and secure as you're moving around, and you can do a double sword draw without the sheaths falling off. Now, a little disclaimer before we start, because this is not going to be completely faithful to traditional Japanese swordplay. See, not only does Zoro wear the swords on his right hip, as opposed to the normal left hip, he also has 3 swords. So that's gonna mess things up a little bit. So I'm gonna show you what I have found to be the best way to carry his katana so I can still do all my fancy little sword draws and spins and everything, even though it may not be 100% correct. Okay, so you're going to take your red sash. This should be long enough to wrap around yourself at least 4 times, but personally I like to double it up and do 8. And for the material, you want it to be a stretchy fabric so that you can pull it even tighter around yourself. Zoro's swords go on the right hip, so you're going to want to start wrapping from the left, keeping a little bit extra. And you're going to want to keep that tension pretty tight as you wrap around. Alright, once you've wrapped around about 8 times, you're going to leave enough fabric at the end for one more wrap. Okay, once you've got the sash nice and tight, you're going to add the swords. Now, in traditional Japanese swordplay, the blade of the sword is always going to be facing up. However, because Zoro has 3 swords, we're going to do things a little bit differently, and I will explain why later. So it doesn't really matter which sword you start with first. Personally, I like to start with Wado Ichimonji, and you're just going to take 2 of the loops from your sash and slide it through. You're then going to take where you did the Sageo knot and tie it around the loops and just finish it off at the end there quite simply. This way the sheath cannot slide all the way out. You're then going to do the same for the next 2. Whichever sword you want in your left hand, have the blade facing up. Whichever sword you want in the right hand, have the blade facing down. Okay, all 3 swords are in their loops, but they're not exactly staying upright very well. So that's where this last bit of fabric that we kept out comes into play. You're gonna grab it, take it around, go under the back of the katanas, and then over the front and tie that into place nice and tight. With that last strap there, you can see it's a lot more secure and the swords are staying in place facing forward. Alright, drawing the katanas. This is again where it differs very greatly from traditional Japanese swordplay, because of course not only are the katanas on the right side of hips opposed to the left, there's also 3 swords to draw. Normally when drawing a katana, you would have one hand to help guide the sword out of the sheath, while the grip is going to be kind of gripping from underneath. And then you use that to pull out your katana, and look, the blade is facing the correct direction. However, of course, in this instance, when you want to do a double draw, that means that you're not going to have this extra free hand. So in my experience, I have found it easiest if the right-handed sword, whichever one you're going to place in your right, is actually facing downwards, and you're going to grip it with just a normal overhand grip, as opposed to the traditional kind of more underhanded. Before you do your double draw, you're going to want to make sure that the sheaths are the right distance apart, because you can't use that other hand to help guide it. You need to be able to pull them all the way out without it being too long and getting stuck in the sheath. You can see here, if my sheath is too far forward, then I'm not going to be able to get the katana all the way out. Like, my arm is just not long enough. So making sure it's far enough back. And if all goes well, you should be able to smoothly pull them out at the same time. You can see too, with this way, both of the katanas have the blade facing outwards, which is usually the correct way to go. Mind you, who really knows with Zoro? But we have 2 swords, how do we get the 3rd? So you're gonna put your right-handed blade in your left hand. You're going to use your thumb to pop it, circle around, overhand grip, and out. Now for this one, it doesn't matter as much if the blade is up or down. It kind of just depends which way you want it to be facing into your mouth. So this one I have the blade facing up, and if you then circle around, uh-huh, 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 uh-huh. The blade is facing outwards. Whereas if I were to have the sheath, so the blade is facing down, did the same thing, pop, circle, pull, around, huh? Uh-huh, ha, 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 ha. Oh. My blade is gonna be facing backwards. So it's really up to you for that one. Sheathing your swords is a much harder endeavor because you don't have that other hand to guide the first blade. So what I like to do is whichever blade is in the right is gonna go in first, and that's very much so just a hope for the best kind of thing in, oh hey, that was actually pretty smooth. But then your left-handed blade, then you can actually properly guide it in as it should be. And there you have it. That is the best way that I've personally found to hold Zoro's katanas in place so they don't flop around, and you can still do the double sword draw and the spins and all that fancy stuff without looking like a complete fool. If you want to learn how to do the sword spin, I have another tutorial for that. I'll link it in the description. But either way, I hope this tutorial helped you out, and go forth and slay that Zoro cosplay because you're gonna look so cool.